Hey guys, welcome to the Girl Take Note podcast. I am your host, Shaunie Sanders, and today we have an amazing guest with us. Her name is Ivana Radojevic. I think I said it right, Ivana. She is Director of Client Services at Stream Commerce, and her goal is to help us supercharge the next generation of Shopify stores. So, Ivana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have this conversation because, one, I have a lot of friends who want to start stores on Shopify, but don't necessarily understand online business and what e-commerce is. And I feel like when people want to start online businesses, they need to have a general or basic understanding of what e-commerce is. And so I think this conversation here will give people more understanding and maybe some tips and strategies on how to launch their stores and how to grow their stores online. But before we jump into any of that, let me ask the question. I always get the story behind, no, it's the story behind the brand. I've been interviewing a lot of entrepreneurs, but let's get the story behind why you decided to go into the e-commerce space and what has that journey been like for you?
Yeah, I wish I could say that my journey into e-commerce was 100% intentional because it was not, to be honest. My background in university, I studied political science. So right out of university, I actually worked for the government for a few years before deciding that wasn't really my calling. And then I started working with a marketing agency, a local marketing agency here, and we started getting more and more Shopify clients, brands that were on Shopify. So we really figured out pretty quickly that we were really good at marketing for e-commerce specifically. And so it sort of snowballed from there. And that was 8+ years ago. And so I like to say I kind of fell into e-commerce, but it was a happy accident because I, intentionally chose to continue my career in that. I really enjoyed it. So that's the short of it.
That's a good story though, to go from the government, because it's like those are two really different worlds. You know what I mean? Go from government to more of a creative space, a creative industry. So that's a really cool transition there, really. Let's talk about e-commerce because, like I said, what was said previously is that most people want to start stores. Most people want to have an online business. And I think since COVID, people have people understand the importance of having an online presence. But I also think that they still don't understand how to market their business, how to get client stills and how to build their stores. They still don't have that basic understanding. So let's talk about e-commerce. Let's kind of give people a basic definition of what e-commerce is so they can kind of understand what that is.
Yeah, I mean, the very basic and short definition of it is selling your product or online through a website. You bring up a really good point with COVID. What we realized, especially in the e-commerce space, is we had a lot of clients that previously only had potentially brick and mortar stores, and all of a sudden they found themselves needing to get online like yesterday. They were, bleeding money day by day that their stores were closed and they weren't able to sell anything online. So I think COVID really highlighted the importance of an omni-channel approach and being in more than one place. But I think one of the really common misconceptions that I see with entrepreneurs that get into the e-commerce space is, just because you build it doesn't mean customers will magically find you online. It just doesn't work that way. So you have to have a strategy behind that in terms of okay, how are you going to drive customers to your site? And even taking a step before that is, have you validated product market fit? So does anybody actually want to buy what you're selling? And I mean, beyond your mom and your dad and your sister and your cousins and your friends who, maybe feel obligated to buy it.
Exactly.
But I mean, has anybody that maybe you don't know purchased your product before? Is there interest in it? Is there customer fit? Is there a target audience for it? People that are actually interested in it. So I think you do need to validate that what you're selling is wanted. And then from there, you sort of build out your marketing strategy on how you're going to drive traffic to your site, convert that traffic, nurture those customers long-term, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions, that a lot of entrepreneurs do think that, well, I have a good product, people are going to want it. And you're right, they don't test it in the market to even know if it's something, not even doing type of market research or bring some people together and say, hey, this is a product you would use. I think that's probably one of the biggest problems that a lot of them have, and maybe why a lot of them don't see that growth that they're looking for. But when it comes to the e-commerce business overall, what challenges you think face some of our entrepreneurs in this space when they're first coming out?
I mean, budget is the obvious one. Not everybody has money to sink into Facebook ads, Google ads.
Yeah.
And especially in that space, it's become very competitive and very expensive. So especially with like some of the entrepreneurs, early stage entrepreneurs that are just starting out with their Shopify store, they tend to go a little bit more, maybe like the influencer route, or, they've got some money that they put into ads, but maybe they're using a channel like Pinterest or TikTok or something that's a little bit less saturated, maybe a little bit less expensive than Meta and Google and so on. But I think one of the key things that I see really working for businesses in general, online businesses in general, is owning their marketing list. So collecting those emails so that you have a database of customers or potential customers that you can communicate with. You don't have to rely on like an Amazon or some other third-party vendor to be able to get customers. You own that customer list. And that, I think, is huge. And being able to communicate with those folks in an intentional way and with, really as you please and as it makes sense for your business. I think that those are key.
And you touched on something like you said with email marketing. And I think a lot of people still don't understand the value of email marketing, because now we're so much into followers, you know what I mean? Building our social media presence, making sure we have enough followers, getting engagement, where a lot of people don't think about capturing emails even on their social media pages. Because if that social media go down, like, what do you have now when all those followers go away? Do you have a list that you can nurture that community outside of that? So let's kind of talk about more about the importance of building and having a strong email list, especially in an e-commerce business, if you want to have success in it, because I still don't think people understand the importance of it.
So you're asking of building an email list specifically?
Yeah.
I think like email kind of had a bad rep for a long time because, people think like you're spamming people. Sometimes customers don't remember how they signed up, which should never be the case. Honestly, like it should be very clear when people are signing up to your email list, what they're signing up for. But generally speaking, on like the low end, at least 20% of a brand's revenue, or a lot of the brands that I work with, at minimum 20% of their revenue comes from email alone. And that's like lowballing it. I see it, usually I like to have it in like that 40% zone, if not higher. It differs for different brands, but that's a significant chunk. And that's a significant chunk of money that you could potentially be leaving on the table by not leveraging, your email list. And also, I think having an actual strategy behind what you're emailing, who you're emailing it to, when you're emailing. It's not a situation of just email everybody the exact same thing all the time and hope it works. And then you wonder why you have like crazy unsubscribe rates or something like that, or you're landing in spam, or even the promotions folder. Better than spam, but still not ideal. We want to be landing in inboxes. And alongside email now, SMS is really having a moment. It has for the last like year plus. And SMS, I would say, is an even more personal channel than email. You're literally sliding into people's text messages and their DMs. So you have to be really intentional with what you're sending to those customers. And, it doesn't always need to be promotional messaging. It can be something that, shows people how to use your product, especially if you've got like a very complex product, or customer service is a big piece too. So a lot of brands are using SMS for customer service. When customers have questions about a product, they can answer it right away so that you can get that conversion a little bit faster, or at least like, contribute to getting that conversion. So, and I think to your point with, people relying just on followers, for example, that kind of ties back into being in different channels so that you don't just rely on a single channel. Because if Instagram goes down for a day, TikTok goes down for a day, and you're just relying on that channel, it could be costing you tens of thousands, if not more, dollars, a day or even an hour for every hour that platform's down. That is 100% true. Are you beginning to see a shift? Because I know for me as a shopper, email used to be my major way of like, let me click on this, let me go to the site. And it's still one way that I still get promotions and stuff like that I take advantage of. But a lot lately, I've been really kind of going through my SMS messages through my mobile phone, because I received something from
let's say Fenty, and they'll have some kind of deal, and I click on it, and I'm straight over there and I'm purchasing. Do you begin to see a shift that more people are beginning to convert through SMS versus email?
Yeah. Yes. So the short answer is yes. And generally speaking, we can't track open rates on text messages, but we can see click rates, and click rates do tend to be quite a bit higher than they are on email. I've seen kind of anywhere 7-8%, which is quite good for clicks. And because the text messages are more intentional, so usually it's like maybe you have a flash sale, maybe it's a price drop trigger or something like that, and you don't send them every day. You send the kind of number out there is maybe 6 a month, which isn't a lot when you think about it. But because of that, that they do tend to convert pretty well. So generally speaking, again, might not make sense for every brand, but the brands that I have worked with, they do see a good return from SMS.
Yeah. I understand the fact, like you said, not everybody wants to be inundated with SMS messages. So it's really reserved for those brands that you really love. You know what I mean? So it's almost like downloading an app on your phone. You're not going to give every, when you do that, it's like it's really reserved for those people, those apps that you use consistently, because you don't want to use up the space on your phone. So I really understand that piece too. So what do you consider to be an approach to, because, a lot of entrepreneurs don't really do email marketing very well. What do you think is approach to creating a successful email marketing campaign? Like, what tips can you give an entrepreneur to say, hey, here are some steps you can take to create one successfully that can lead back to a customer converting on your Shopify site?
I like to have a content calendar in place, and that feeds into my email strategy so that I know what I'm sending when. I usually will have like my promotions planned out. I tend to do that on a quarterly basis, and have any promos that I have coming up, any like new product drops, any cool collaborations that I want to tell my audience about. And from there, figure out like kind of what campaigns I want to send around that and to who. So it doesn't need necessarily, especially if you have a big list, might not make sense to send that to everybody, because not everybody is going to be interested about every piece of your business, especially if you have a big product catalog. So, if somebody's not interested in wallets, they've never purchased the wallets from your site, they've never even indicated they're interested in wallets, like what, might not make sense to send them content about wallets. So really being intentional about what you're sending into what audience, and also like who you're excluding from those sends, I think is really important. And also understanding what can be automated. So do you have some of those key automated flows set up, like your welcome flow, your abandoned checkout flow, your post-purchase flow? Those are automated. You set them up, they generate you money in the background. Don't just set it and forget it. That is one of my big tips, because sometimes I see brands, they set it and they never look at it for like 2 years. And it's like, well, okay, let's review this. So I do recommend, even for like your automated flows, let's take a look at them at least like quarterly, or, maybe every 6 months, to make sure they're still relevant. But also like looking at the data and what's the data telling you. So if you're getting, your open rates aren't really good, your click rates aren't very good, you're always looking at the data, and from there gauging what you can do to improve your open rates, improve your click rates, improve your conversion rates. So it's never just set it and forget it and do the same thing over and over and hope for a good result.
Yeah. Let's step back for a minute. Let's talk about that business owner, that entrepreneur, like you said, that's coming out with their first product. They have a few sales, but not a lot. They want to build their store on Shopify. Maybe they're moving from their website and say, hey, I want to do it on Shopify, because there's a lot of benefits to having a store on Shopify. And I would like to get into some of those too. How do you tell them to go about even capturing, let's say they don't even have an email list. How do they go about even capturing emails today? I mean,
if you're driving any sort of traffic to the site, which I hope you are driving some traffic, right? Having a email capture form on your site that you are looking at, is it converting? What is it converting at? Is going to be key. It doesn't need to be anything super complex or over the top. It doesn't necessarily always have to be like sign up and get 10% off or 15% off. It could be, enter for a monthly giveaway, or maybe it's just like, be the first to know about something like very exclusive access. But make sure you have some form of lead capture set up on your site first and foremost, because sometimes that's missing. That's like a very, very basic piece of it. Of course, if you have the budget and you're driving some top of funnel traffic to your site, again, look at channels outside of just Meta and Google, especially if your budget is tight. If your audience, maybe you're in the home and garden space, well, your audience could very well be on Pinterest, and that could convert really well for you, or be a cheaper option for you. Working with influencers, and again, if budget is an issue, maybe don't go to, the Kylie Jenners of the world, because you'll probably be outside of your budget.
Way outside.
Just a little bit, right? But maybe go and look at micro or even nano influencers, because I have seen, folks on Instagram, on TikTok that have a following of maybe 1,000 to 2,000 people, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't look like a lot, but they're really engaged followers and they're monetizing that audience.
Yeah.
And so, numbers aren't everything. It's more engagement, in my opinion. But look at, if you reach out to, we work with 20 or 30 smaller influencers. Well, if you're tapping into their audience, that could actually be a pretty big audience that you're reaching and driving to your site.
Yeah.
So the collaborations is huge too, especially if you're just starting out.
Yeah, a lot of people I notice take that route as well, and I think you also have to be very careful who you attach your brand with as well. You know what I mean, to make sure your goals and what your brand stands for aligns with theirs. So that's super important. But that was some good tips, because I'm telling you, a lot of people don't even know how to capture emails. I know a lot of people who are beginning to capture emails through their Linktree. Like you go to Linktree and they said, hey, sign up. They have an email sign up thing there. I just feel like today it's so hard for people to give you their emails, because like you said, over the years, people have been so inundated with promotional emails and so many different things. Even my inbox is like super full. And it's like, now I'm very particular when I put my email somewhere, because I'm like, do I really want something from this company before I do this? And so everyone does, I think, still have that kind of like that doubt that, can we really capture emails? Is email still the big way to go when it comes to building a list, building a community outside of just social media? So this is why I feel like it's such an important conversation, because we do need to understand how important it is, and people need to know tips and strategies on how to capture emails. Where is the best way to capture an email? And once you get it, how you nurture them after that,
Yeah. And I mean, to your point, like email, a lot of people now, they do guard their email. Yeah. They know exactly what's happening. They give their email. They know they're going to be hit with all these emails. But so email is a way to, make sales and engage your customers, but it's not the only way. It should just be like one piece of your arsenal.
Yeah. And when it comes to, let's talk about drop shipping, because a lot of people are in drop shipping now. And is drop shipping something that works on Shopify? Is that a tactic that you would tell a client and say, hey, you could try drop shipping? Or is there something that a customer come to you and say, hey, I have a drop shipping business. How can I make this work on Shopify?
So yes, it does work on Shopify. I think drop shipping was really kind of popularized with, all the kind of entrepreneurs like living and working in like Bali and starting a drop shipping business. And they just, you just see them like rolling in cash and living the life, right? Yeah. That's I've been hit with some of those like YouTube shorts and ads and stuff. I'm like, this looks pretty good.
It does. I'm even thinking about doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with drop shipping is, and by the way, I'm by no means a drop shipping expert. I work primarily with brands that have their own products.
Yeah.
But the thing with drop shipping is, and I think the reason it's so appealing to people is because it's quick to get started. Arguably a lot quicker than like launching your own brand, your own products and et cetera, because you don't have to try and find a manufacturer, figure out packaging, like all this stuff, it's a whole thing, right? So drop shipping is fairly quickly to set up. But the thing is that like, you don't really have control over your brand in that sense, if you will. So, you might get like the packaging, for example, you don't even have control over. So if you're drop shipping from somewhere in like China or something like that, and it arrives to your customer's door, and they could look at the package and not even remember like that they ordered from your site, because it's, it looks entirely different. You have no control over like the quality of the product, the actual kind of customer experience. So, there's pros and cons to both, of course. And I definitely see the appeal of drop shipping. And you can do both of them on Shopify. It's just kind of what's your end goal I think it is kind of the big question there.
Yeah. What do you think is some of the most successful stores that do well on Shopify? Is there a particular type of genre that does well, then does a bit better than others on Shopify?
Honestly, not really. Like I've worked with a lot of different brands, from kind of the home and garden space to like TV personalities launching their own brands, to regulated industries, to apparel. I mean, to like RV accessories. Like it's a whole breadth of customer or brands, I should say. So I wouldn't say that there's necessarily one that does better than another. It's more so kind of what is. Again, like you build it, you've got a functional site, a site optimized for conversions. And then what? Like, how are you marketing your brand? How are you differentiating yourself?
What are some of the benefits to being on Shopify?
So for me, I'm not a techie person by any means. So I like the easier, the better.
Yes.
So I think one of the appeals with Shopify is that pretty quick to get set up. They have tons of different themes. They even have some like free themes that you don't have to pay for. And it's, if you don't need to be a developer to be able to like set it up. At least like from my standpoint, right? Like I could go in and I could do it. Obviously, if there's something more complex, I'm not going to be messing around with the code. I'll pull in a dev at that point. But it's, pretty like straightforward in terms of like, oh, you drop a picture in here, add some copy in here, upload your products. Like it's not super complex, which I think is it's very appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah. That non-technical person, we love places like Shopify, and the easier the better to make it seamless and being able to add your products and stuff like that. I work with a friend who has a store on Shopify, but I think one of the biggest things, like you said, they go in, they set up the store, it's super easy to do, but then it's like, now what? How do you market your store? And a lot of them really just depend on social media. They really don't think about anything outside of that. And I think when it comes to paid ads, I think a lot of people are very confused when it comes to paid ads on how to get the best out of an ad. You know what I mean? To really convert and turn that into an actual sale. And I think a lot of people are very confused by it. Do you think paid ads is something that still works really well when it comes to converting?
It can. I think it can. It also depends like kind of who you're working with. So obviously I'm biased towards the team that we work with. I think they're really good at what they do. But it's, again, going back to the set it and forget it, it's definitely not that on ads. And especially if you're sinking in, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're not just setting it up and not looking at it for a month. You're in there, you're optimizing audiences, you're A/B testing creative, you're A/B testing copy and all of that. So I think with, especially with like the iOS updates, that threw a curveball for, a lot of paid folks. Attribution's been a little bit more tricky, but I think what we're seeing, again, it depends on the brand, but of course, every platform wants to attribute the sale to their platform. So you spend more money with them, right? So it's, Facebook's going to tell you, they're the ones that got the sale. Klaviyo is going to tell you, no, the email got the sale. Google's going to want the sale. So it's like a bit of a battle. And so attribution's always been a difficult thing to track, really. But I think with, I've mentioned Pinterest before, but Pinterest is a place where right now we're seeing really good return on ad spend. More so than on some of the other channels like the Metas and the Googles. So I think there is still value in it. But it's, again, how much of your marketing budget do you delegate to it? And what else are you doing? Because paid can't be the only thing. Yeah.
So you would suggest a good marketing mix in order to see growth and see conversion for sale.
Yes. And the cool thing is with, so for email marketing, we primarily use Klaviyo, a software called Klaviyo. And what they'll actually let you do is you can take your audience from Klaviyo, you can sync it to Google, you can sync it to Facebook, and then target those folks on Facebook, on Google, or tell Facebook and Google, hey, find me more people like my VIPs off my list. And Facebook will go and find those people for you. So you can optimize that. Everything can work together. Nothing, these different strategies don't have to work in silos. They can actually work together. But you might find that, paid does really well for you, or maybe email does really well for you, or maybe organic does really well for you. You know, your SEO game is just strong. So, but I do recommend trying different things and kind of seeing what makes sense for your business.
Yeah, I think SEO is huge. You know what I mean? And that organic growth. And I think a lot of people try to go that organic route, although it's a much slower route to go. You know, and all growth is slow. You know, it's not like you're looking for this overnight thing that's, my product is just going to blow up overnight and I'm just going to be highly successful. I don't think that's nobody's story, but it's a slow process, you know, and I think understanding more on email, because I myself need to understand email more also because with me and what I'm doing, even with my podcast and trying to capture emails, I don't do a very good job of it. Right. I just really don't. I put it on my thing and I just forget about it. I don't even tell people, hey, give me your email address. I think that's something that we just don't do either. We don't even say it. We don't even put it on any of our pages and say, sign up for my email. We just put it on our Linktree thing and that's it. That's all we're looking to do. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that and think that, I'll just capture emails that way versus me actively trying to get emails. So what do you suggest an entrepreneur do in order to get emails? Should we actively try to get emails, or should we, like you said, not to set it and forget it, but to set it and forget it and see what happens from there?
I mean, I would say if you are collecting emails, have some sort of a strategy of how you're communicating with those folks. So at the very least, have like a welcome email, letting them know, you know, hey, so they know they've actually signed up and like who you are, what they can expect to see from you, basically like a little orientation email. Send that at the very least versus just not sending anything, because then what can happen is if 6 months down the road, you decide, you know what, I will send an email now. Those folks are going to have they're not going to remember what they signed up for or who you even are because they haven't heard from you. Yeah. So I think if you are collecting emails, have some sort of a strategy in place of, you know, how often you want to communicate and what you want to communicate. And I think people tend to shy away from like self-promotion and not everybody. Some folks are great at it and that's great. But then there's some people that they're almost, you know, they don't want to be promoting themselves online, on social media. They don't want to ask for the emails. They don't want to promote what it is that they do. They're kind of, you know, don't want that like in your face promotion, but you do have to do that to an extent. So remind your followers like, hey, I've got a newsletter. Here's what you can expect from it. Sign up, you know, maybe once a week, you remind them to do so. I think that would be kind of my biggest tip is also like, don't be afraid to actually like ask people to sign up. Yeah. And I like I said, I think that's one of the things that people are afraid of. It's almost like people who are in sales, they're afraid to actually talk to people about sales, to actually ask for sales or get sales. And I think email is also another one that we kind of like, I'm not going to ask nobody for it. I'm going to just put this on my thing and they sign up for it and I'll leave it at that. And then you're right. Then after that, there's no follow-up. There's no nurturing to that list. It's more so like when I get something to say, I'll send it to them. And then it becomes that thing, like you said, I forgot. They're like, I forgot I even signed up for this. When did I sign up for this? So I think that's probably one of the things that's like super important. But what do you tell a person, the importance of having, because there's so many different platforms that you can do stores on, right? Like you can kind of do your own thing and build out your own website, but do you see it more beneficial of building out a Shopify store versus building something off on a website? And is it because of the different tools and things that you get access to with Shopify versus going on your own? Yeah, I mean, if you're kind of custom building a site from scratch, what you also have to keep in mind with something like that is that unless you built it or you are really familiar with code and you're comfortable with that, anytime you want to make any change, you have to go back to the developer that built it. They're probably not going to do it for free unless you found a really generous person to work with. So you're paying every time. Every time you need to change something, if you don't know how to do it yourself, you have to pay somebody to do it. Now, there is still a component of that with Shopify if you're doing something more complex. If you're doing something more custom, adding custom scripts or something like that. But again, like that's kind of down the road. And at that point, you cross that bridge when you get there. But if you go fully custom right out of the gate, I think the big thing to be aware of would be cost that could be associated with that. And of course, Shopify has a massive ecosystem of apps for basically everything you can imagine. So you want a subscription, there's an app for that. You want gift with purchase, there's an app for that. You want wish list, there's an app for that. Like there's apps for everything, and it's quite quick and easy to install that. But of course, they're not, again, most of them have like a freemium model, or many of them do. But anytime you want any additional features, you do have to pay for them. So that can add up too.
Yeah. Let's talk about the future of e-commerce. And the reason why is that I think about marketplace delivery, right? All the Instacarts, the Ubers and all those things, right? And how now we're becoming a space of we want things right away. We want them quick. I don't want to wait, that type of thing. Do we see a shift in e-commerce at some point where it was so crazy. I was having this conversation with one of our leaders in our organization, and I talked about, do we see a shift where it comes to where a lot of sites are going to forego their own websites and really start more so just putting most of their products and everything on these marketplace delivery apps simply because of the get it right now, the not waiting to get anything? It's how Amazon do it also. But do we see that maybe happening? Do we see that big shift happening in e-commerce where most people might shy away from having their own websites and maybe being on a marketplace where you get your product discovered by a lot more people, a lot more eyes on your product or service?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the 1 and 2 day delivery, we've all got like Jeff Bezos and Amazon to thank for that, and just setting these crazy standards. But like with these marketplaces, yes, you can then tap into their audiences. Again, you do have to do some promotion just because you're out there. Like people aren't necessarily going to find you. But again, you don't, you want to own those customer lists so that you can resell to those folks and you don't have to rely on a third party vendor. I think that's kind of the biggest, not necessarily, I don't want to say downside, but kind of drawback to that.
It is.
But there's lots of folks on Amazon that have really successful storefronts, on Etsy that are doing, really well. So there's this like misconception also, I think, that you have to be everywhere at once. You have to be on all these channels. You have to be on every single social media platform. And the truth is that for a lot of small business owners, that's just not feasible. In most cases, you've got like a 1-2 person team. They don't have enough time in the day to be on all these platforms and manage everything. So it might make sense for, at least proof of concept that you are on Amazon or on Etsy. And then if you see that's really taken off, well, then maybe it does make sense to have your own Shopify store and drive that traffic there.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's pros and cons to kind of all these options. It just what makes sense for you as a business owner at that time, and what do you have resources to execute well on, rather than doing a 50% job and being everywhere.
Yeah. I see that too. It's such a, like I said, we still live in a world where everybody just want it right now, and we don't necessarily have that type of marketplace when it comes to like fashion, of course, you know what I mean? Like certain things, we just don't see it. And I wonder, is like eventually in e-commerce space, will we begin to see a marketplace that pops up and like, hey, get your Dolce sneakers the next day versus waiting from, you know what I mean? Like, I really wonder if that's where we're going as a country when it comes to e-commerce, where everyone wants everything so convenient. They want it now. We now have the in-store pickup option where I don't have to wait for it. I go in store and pick it up. So it's just, and Amazon's coming out an option where you shop in store. It's all right there. You don't have to wait either. We have our Amazon store. So just a convenience driven shopper. Do you see a lot of that when it comes to Shopify? It's just a convenience driven type of shopper who are looking to say, I want it now versus waiting 5 or 6 days to ship.
I haven't seen a ton of that yet. It's not to say that that's not still going to happen or could potentially happen.
Yeah.
One thing though that we do see a lot is that customers hate to pay for shipping.
Oh yeah,
so
I do too.
If they get to checkout and they get hit with that shipping charge, you'll just see those abandoned carts go through the roof, right? So I think at the very least, if you have to charge customers for shipping, add like a free shipping threshold, or bake it into the price or something like that, because customers absolutely hate to pay for shipping.
Yeah.
I would say more so than waiting 5 days to get their item. But also, like, that's where you can communicate with your customers post-purchase to let them know, hey, we're busy putting your order together. We'll do our best to get it to you by X date. And I find that customers, especially the ones that have strong brand loyalty, like, they're okay with that. They're not, if it's something very last minute that you need tomorrow, then people know to go to like Amazon because you'll most likely get it quickly, right? But if it's something more like Dolce & Gabbana, for example, I just don't, and I we could talk a year from now and I'm totally wrong here, but I just don't see, because they're kind of a premium brand, I don't see them offering that quick shipping. There's really been a movement in like the premiumization of the economy, I think the word is, right? So where people are like, especially these like luxury brands, they're or even regular brands are adding kind of luxury offerings where they are charging more for that luxury, and there's people that are paying for that. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, there's always going to be a space, because I got to admit, I get pretty excited when I see an email say your package is on the way. I do get excited after I brought something and it's like, hey, we're preparing it and your package is on the way. And I'm like, oh, it's going to be here soon. You know what I mean? But I do notice that a lot of brands have been like shortening their shipping. So it's like you could pay for 1 to 2 days. So they do give you an option to get it a little quicker, which I think is a big help to kind of offset that strategy of like get it next day and get it delivered to your house within a few hours. So I think they're really trying to step up when it comes to that. But this has been a good conversation. Like, I mean, e-commerce is something I could talk about a lot, right? Talk about all day and all the AI aspects of it as well and where it's going. But what advice would you give a business entrepreneur who's looking to get on Shopify to get his or her business up and running? What advice would you give them how to get started?
I think first and foremost, well, actually my biggest piece, because I see business owners falling into this trap quite a bit, is they wait for it to be perfect before they launch anything. And then we are just in this endless cycle of QA, like UAT, going through testing, fixing bugs, all this stuff. And next thing you know, you're like a year delayed in launch because they want it to be perfect. And the fact is, at least from what I've seen, is that there's always things you can change. Yeah. And you need to launch it to get traffic on the site, to see how people are interacting with the site. And then you'll know what you need to change. And it's a living thing. Like, you're always updating things. You're always testing things. You're always trying to optimize your conversion rate. Especially if you're a big brand, you're making $50 million in sales a year. A small change in your conversion rate can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars of more or less sales. Yeah. So I think don't be obsessed with perfection and having it be perfect and having everything be perfect. A lot of it will be trial and error, and you will learn as you go, but get it like as close as you can, get it like 80% of the way there and like launch the darn thing and then see what you learn from there. I think that's the biggest kind of thing that I see with, many of the brands that I've worked with over the last 8 years, is they get into that trap. And then I kind of have to push them a little bit to launch, and then they're okay. Like, they're kind of panicky. And then we launch and they're like, wow, the world didn't end. Things didn't break down,
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Would you suggest that a business entrepreneur hire a company to help them with their stores and launching? Or would you say do what your budget allows you to do?
The latter. So, it can be a big expense. I'm not going to lie, especially, depending on the size of agency that you work with. It's not necessarily cheap. And a lot of the things that you might do initially have no immediate ROI. Yeah. Like, we might recommend you set up a dev store so that we can do testing. So we're not testing on the live site. But something like that, you're not going to see an immediate ROI on, but it's really vital in improving processes and testing and QA and all of that. So I would say there is, lots that you can kind of start on your own. And then as your budget allows, you add on. You also, at some point get to the point where you have to invest money to make money to allow you to scale. Yeah. And so you have to, as a business owner, I think, recognize where that tipping point is, where you're stopping yourself from scaling further because you're not investing in what you need, whether it's help with marketing or help with, fulfillment or whatever the case may be. So I think have a good grasp on your P&L and, like your profit and loss statement. But have a roadmap and understand, like, hire strategically when it makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I spoke to a lot of entrepreneurs and they talk about when it's time to grow. And because you mentioned that, like, know when it's time to scale and bring other people on, because in order to grow, you can't grow alone. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You have to grow with people. That's how you grow your business. Any business, that's how everybody grows. So I'm glad you really touched on that. But this has been good. But before we end this show, Ivana, this is what I ask all of my guests. I'm going to ask you too. And I just want you to know, I really enjoyed this conversation. This has been really good.
Me too.
What was some of the best advice you received from another woman?
I think, and like, this is something that I felt victim to, if you want to say it that way, as well, especially early on in my career, is I think as women, we really do shy away from asking for what we're really worth.
Oh yeah.
More so than like the male colleagues that I've had. And I've gotten to the point in my career, especially, I've got a number of years under my belt now. I don't know everything by any means, but I know some things. Yeah. And, getting comfortable with asking for what you're actually worth, and weeding out potential customers that maybe they're not a good fit, because if you name your price at the beginning and they right away like throw up their hands and like, well, that's like too much, or whatever the case may be, they might not be the right fit. But that doesn't mean you need to like lower, kind of yourself to just be able to like bring that business in. Yeah. And I think that goes like negotiating salaries or anything like that as well. Like, if you're good at what you do, you should be compensated for that. And I don't think you should be afraid to like ask for that. So I think, especially like a lot of younger women that are getting into the workforce, I see that they just like sort of don't have that kind of negotiating mindset. And I do think that's like one of the key takeaways I've had working in a number of different industries is you have to know your worth and you have to ask for what you're worth.
Yeah, that was such good advice, because as women, like you said, we do not do that. We even don't. Some of us are even afraid to even ask for raises, to talk about raises, to ask for advancement or promotions. And we do need to understand and be more confident in our skills and what we've done in our career and what we accomplished. Like, I tell my friends sometimes we got to give ourselves a little clout. You know what I mean? Like, pat ourselves on the back, brag on ourselves a little bit, because we've accomplished a lot of great things. And you're right, you deserve to be compensated for what you're doing and what you're good at. So that was good advice. I appreciate you for saying that, because we continuously as women need to hear that. Ask for what you're worth. Don't take nothing less. Like you said, if a client is trying to haggle you down, that's not the client for you.
Exactly.
The price is the price. That's what's been trending. I heard like the price is the price. It's been trending.
Yeah. And you've spent, a good portion of your career becoming really good at that one particular thing. And, that comes at a price. Otherwise, there's lots of people out there that could do it for less, and it might take longer. And at the end of the day, cost
exactly.
more. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much, Ivana, again, for being on the show. This has been an awesome conversation. I am Shaunie Sanders. This is the Girl Take Note podcast, and I will see you guys next time.